Dr. David Carter pressed his face against the thick glass window of Kepler Station's medical bay. The red warning lights bathed everything in an angry glow. Behind the shimmering energy wall of Bay 7, 5 alien beings sat huddled on the cold metal floor. These weren't just any aliens, they were Zephyrians, a peaceful species known throughout the galaxy for their glowing blue skin patterns and their ability to speak with their minds. But now something was terribly wrong. The beautiful light patterns on their skin were getting weaker and weaker, like someone was slowly turning down a dimmer switch. The 2 adult Zephyrians, who looked like they could be parents, kept trying to wrap their long arms around 3 smaller ones. David could see they were scared, even though their faces were so different from humans. "Dr. Carter, we just got another message," called out Angela Brooks from across the room. She was the station's head of communications, a tall woman with kind eyes who always seemed to know what was happening before anyone else. "The Centaurian medical ship just left. They said they can't risk their crew." David felt his stomach drop. The Centaurians were supposed to be the smartest doctors in the galaxy. If they were running away, things must be really bad. He watched through the window as one of the small Zephyrian children started shaking. The parents moved closer, their own skin patterns flickering like broken light bulbs. "What about the Altarians?" David asked, turning away from the heartbreaking scene. "I thought they were the good guys. You know, the ones who always help people in trouble." Angela shook her head sadly. "Their ambassador sent a very polite message. Something about insurance problems and safety regulations. Basically, they're not coming either." Just then, Leon Washington walked into the room carrying a strange-looking device covered in wires and blinking lights. Leon was one of those people who could fix anything with spare parts and creativity. His dark hands were already stained with grease from working on the machine. "Hey Doc, I've been checking the station's power readings," Leon said, his voice worried. "Something weird is going on. Ever since they installed that new quantum power core 3 days ago, I've been picking up strange energy signals. And guess what? That's exactly when our alien friends started getting sick." David looked back at the Zephyrian family. The smallest child had stopped moving. Its parents were making soft sounds that the translation computers couldn't figure out, but David didn't need a translator to understand. Those were the sounds of parents watching their child suffer. Through the main viewport, David could see another ship pulling away from the station. This one had the markings of the Vegan Medical Corps, another species that usually helped in emergencies. But not this time. One by one, every alien government was deciding that helping this family was too dangerous, too expensive, or too complicated. "Sir, we're getting messages from Earth Command too," Angela said quietly. "They want all human personnel to stay away from the quarantine area. They're worried about contamination." David felt anger rising in his chest. Here was a family, maybe not human, but still a family, dying right in front of everyone, and the entire galaxy was just walking away. The adults, Keth VA and Mordin, according to the station records, had been traveling with their children when they got sick. Now they were trapped behind an energy wall, getting weaker every hour. "Doc, I think I might know what's causing this," Leon said, looking at his scanner. "These energy readings, they're not natural. It's like something is interfering with their brain waves. Zephyrians think with electrical patterns in their skin, right? What if something is jamming those signals?" David thought about what Leon was saying. It made sense. Zephyrians didn't just use their glowing patterns to look pretty. Those lights were actually how they thought and communicated. If something was disrupting those patterns, it would be like slowly erasing their minds. Another ship undocked from the station. Through his communicator, David could hear the station AI making announcements about reduced personnel and safety protocols. Soon, there would be nobody left except the basic maintenance crew and a few humans like them. The youngest Zephyrian child had gone completely dark now. No light patterns at all. David watched as the parents pressed their faces against the energy barrier, looking out at the humans with what could only be described as desperate hope. Even though they came from different worlds, some things were universal. The look in their eyes said everything. "Please don't leave us too." Angela walked over to stand next to David. "You know, if we go in there and something happens to us, Earth Command is going to be very unhappy. We could lose our jobs. Maybe even face criminal charges for disobeying direct orders." Leon joined them at the window. "And if that power core is really causing this, trying to fix it could destroy half the station. That's billion-credit equipment we're talking about." David looked at his 2 colleagues, then back at the dying family. Every logical, reasonable species in the galaxy had looked at this situation and decided it was too risky, too expensive, too complicated. The smart thing to do was follow orders, keep a safe distance, and let whatever was going to happen, happen. But as David watched HFY gently stroke the darkened skin of the unconscious child, he realized something important. Sometimes being smart wasn't the same as being right. "Angela, Leon," he said, his voice steady and determined. "Get your gear. We're going in there." Dr. David Carter wiped sweat from his forehead as he worked over the improvised medical equipment. The quarantine bay looked like a mad scientist's laboratory now, with cables running everywhere and machines that weren't supposed to work together somehow keeping the Zephyrian family alive. The air smelled like burning circuits and desperation. Leon Washington was crouched behind a panel, his hands deep in a tangle of wires. He had somehow connected the station's backup life support to 3 different medical scanners and a coffee machine. It shouldn't have worked, but Leon had a gift for making impossible things possible. Sparks flew from his makeshift creation as he muttered under his breath about stubborn alien technology. "Okay, this is either brilliant or we're all going to get electrocuted," Leon said, wiping his hands on his uniform. "But the air in here should be clean enough to keep them breathing for a few more hours." Angela Brooks sat at a portable computer terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she tried to maintain contact with the station's systems. Most of the automated functions had been locked down by the various alien governments before they left, but Angela was good at finding backdoors that the programmers never intended. "David, I've got good news and bad news," she called out without looking up from her screen. "The good news is I finally got a clear reading on what's happening to them." David looked up from the unconscious Zephyrian child he was monitoring. The little one's breathing was shallow, and the light patterns on their skin had almost completely faded. "And the bad news? It's not a disease at all. It's like someone is jamming a radio station, except the radio station is their brains." Angela turned her screen so David could see the wave patterns she had discovered. "Look at this. Every time the station's power core cycles up, there's a specific frequency that gets broadcast throughout the entire structure." Leon crawled out from under his jury-rigged life support system. "You mean we've been thinking about this all wrong? They're not sick, they're being attacked." David felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. That's why the other species left so fast. They knew exactly what was causing this. He walked over to look at Angela's data more closely. "Show me the timeline again." Angela pulled up another screen. The new quantum power core came online exactly 72 hours ago. The Zephyrian family started showing symptoms exactly 72 hours ago. The frequency that's hurting them is the exact same frequency the power core uses to generate energy. "But why didn't anyone else get sick?" David asked. "Because Zephyrians are the only species that thinks with bioelectrical patterns," Leon explained, understanding dawning on his face. "It's like, imagine if someone built a machine that made a sound so high that only dogs could hear it, and it gave every dog in the area a massive headache. Except instead of sound waves, it's quantum energy waves hitting their thought patterns." The adult Zephyrian named HFY made a soft sound and looked directly at David. Even though the translation computers weren't working properly anymore, David could see the gratitude in those alien eyes. HFY somehow understood that these humans were trying to help when everyone else had given up. Angela's computer beeped with an incoming message. Her face went pale as she read it. "David, you need to see this. I managed to hack into some of the alien government databases before they completely locked us out." David walked over and read over her shoulder. What he saw made him angry in a way he had never experienced before. Page after page of classified reports, all describing the exact same condition they were seeing now. Reports from Centaurian medical facilities, Altarian research stations, even vegan science ships. Every major species in the galaxy knew exactly what quantum frequency poisoning looked like in Zephyrians. "They've seen this before," David said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Multiple times. And they just left each time." "It gets worse," Angela said, scrolling down to another section. "Look at the legal department communications. They're not afraid of the disease spreading. They're afraid of lawsuits. If word gets out that their quantum technology can kill an entire species, every government in the galaxy could face massive compensation claims." Leon slammed his hand against the wall. "So they're just going to let this family die to protect their bottom line?" The youngest Zephyrian child suddenly convulsed, their small body jerking as another wave of quantum interference hit their nervous system. HFY made a sound that needed no translation, pure parental anguish. The other parent, Mordin, pressed their face against the energy barrier, looking out at the humans with desperate hope. David knelt down next to the child and checked their vital signs. The readings were getting weaker. They had maybe 6 hours left, probably less. The other children weren't doing much better, and even the adults were starting to fade. Angela, can we use the station's communication array to broadcast a counter frequency? David asked. Something that might cancel out the interference. Angela's fingers danced across her keyboard as she ran calculations. Theoretically, yes. If we could generate the exact opposite wave pattern and broadcast it through the communication system, it might work like noise-canceling headphones. But there's a problem, Leon said, looking at the station schematics on a cracked tablet he had found. To generate enough power for a counter frequency that's strong, we'd have to overload the communication array. And that's connected directly to the main power core. David felt his heart sink. What would happen? The power core would overload and probably explode. We're talking about a chain reaction that could destroy half the station and kill everyone on board. Leon paused, looking at the dying family. And that's if we're lucky. If we're unlucky, it could destabilize the quantum field and create a black hole. Angela looked up from her computer. David, I just intercepted a message from Earth Command. They're sending a ship to evacuate all human personnel. We have maybe 12 hours before they arrive and order us to leave. David looked at his two friends, then at the Zephyrian family. The parents were holding their children now, all of them growing dimmer by the hour. In 12 hours, they would all be dead. In 12 hours, another family would be abandoned by a galaxy that valued money more than life. But humans were different. David had always believed that, and now he had a chance to prove it. They could follow orders, evacuate safely, and let someone else worry about the consequences. Or they could do what humans did best, ignore the impossible odds and help people who needed help. Leon, how long would it take you to modify the communication array? Leon grinned, despite the situation. Give me 4 hours and a lot of coffee. Angela, can you keep the alien governments from interfering? I can try. But David, if we do this, we're probably going to end up in prison. At best. David looked one more time at the dying family. Sometimes being human meant making the hard choice, even when it was the wrong choice by everyone else's standards. Then we better make it count. Dr. David Carter stared at the strange device he had built on the medical table. It looked like something from a mad scientist's nightmare, wires connecting brain scanners to communication equipment, all held together with medical tape and desperate hope. The machine hummed softly, but David knew it could easily kill him if something went wrong. The Zephyrian family was getting worse by the hour. Their beautiful blue light patterns had faded to almost nothing, like stars dying in the darkness of space. The youngest child hadn't moved in over an hour, and even the parents seemed to be losing their fight for life. David, this is crazy, Angela whispered, checking the readings on her portable computer. Human brains don't work like Zephyrian brains. We don't have the right kind of neural pathways for telepathic communication. If you try to connect with their minds directly, your brain could just stop working. Leon finished tightening the last wire connection and stepped back from the device. And that's assuming the best-case scenario. The electrical feedback alone could cause permanent brain damage. You could end up in a coma, or worse. David nodded, understanding the risks. But he also understood that they were running out of time. The counter-frequency plan would take hours to set up, and the Zephyrian family didn't have hours left. Their alien biology was too different from anything humans had studied before. The only way to truly understand what was happening to them was to experience it directly. Look at them, David said, pointing to the unconscious eldest child, Valani. She fell into a coma 30 minutes ago. The parents are barely hanging on. Our medical equipment can keep their bodies alive, but we can't fix what we don't understand. Angela looked at her computer screen with worried eyes. David, there's something else I need to tell you. I managed to decrypt some of the alien government communications before they blocked our access completely. She paused, as if afraid to continue. This family isn't just random travelers who got sick. What do you mean? Leon asked, looking up from his equipment checks. They are refugees, Angela said quietly. They were fleeing from their home planet when they stopped here. And the reason they were running, they have evidence of war crimes. Recordings, documents, proof that several members of the Galactic Council ordered the destruction of civilian colonies. Leon's eyes went wide. That's why everyone left so fast. It's not just about avoiding lawsuits over the quantum frequency technology. Exactly, Angela confirmed. Dead witnesses can't testify in galactic courts. If this family dies here, the evidence they're carrying dies with them. Some very powerful people want to make sure that happens. David felt a cold anger settling in his stomach. Not only was the galaxy willing to let this family die to protect their technology patents, but they were actively hoping for it to cover up their war crimes. The Zephyrians weren't just sick, they were inconvenient truth-tellers who needed to disappear. That settles it, David said, placing the neural interface headset on his head. We're not just saving a family anymore. We're preserving justice. Angela grabbed his arm. David, wait. Let me try to find another way. Maybe I can dash. There is no other way, David interrupted gently. Leon needs time to modify the communication array. We don't have that time. This is our only shot at understanding their condition well enough to help them. David activated the neural interface device. Immediately, he felt something like electric butterflies dancing inside his skull. The sensation was strange and uncomfortable, like trying to hear a conversation in a language that didn't quite exist. Then, slowly, alien thoughts began to brush against his mind. The first thing he experienced was overwhelming fear and sadness. The Zephyrians weren't just physically sick, they were emotionally terrified. They understood that everyone had abandoned them, and they were facing death alone in a strange place, far from home. Then came the memories. David saw through Kethvia's eyes as their home colony burned. Massive ships in orbit, firing energy weapons at defenseless cities below. Children running through smoke-filled streets while buildings collapsed around them. The family had barely escaped with their lives and the precious data storage devices containing evidence of who had ordered the attack. Pain shot through David's skull like lightning. His human brain wasn't designed to process telepathic information, and the strain was enormous. He could feel his own thoughts becoming confused as alien emotions flooded through his mind. Angela's voice seemed to come from very far away, shouting his name. I can see it, David gasped, tasting blood in his mouth. The quantum frequency isn't just interfering with their thoughts. It's like someone is playing extremely loud music directly into their brains, drowning out everything else. The neural interface was overheating now. David could feel his own brain patterns becoming unstable as the alien thoughts overwhelmed his human neural pathways. His vision blurred, and he could hear Leon shouting for him to disconnect the device. David, you have to stop. Your brain activity is going crazy. Angela grabbed his shoulders, trying to pull him away from the machine. Not yet, David said through gritted teeth, blood trickling from his nose. They're trying to show me something important. Something about how to fix this. Through the pain and confusion, David began to understand what the Zephyrians were trying to communicate. Their species had once faced a similar problem on their homeworld. A natural phenomenon that interfered with their telepathic abilities. But they had found a solution, not through technology, but through biology. The images flowing into David's mind showed Zephyrians working with other life forms on their planet. Certain plants and microorganisms that could somehow amplify and stabilize their natural bioelectrical fields. It was like using living creatures as natural amplifiers for their thought patterns. Symbiotic resonance, David whispered, the alien word somehow making sense in his overwhelmed mind. They're showing me how they used to work with other living things to boost their telepathic abilities. Maybe we can use something similar to counter the quantum interference. The neural interface sparked and began smoking. Leon quickly shut down the power as David collapsed onto the floor, his body convulsing from the neural feedback. Angela knelt beside him, checking his pulse as his eyes rolled back in his head. David! Stay with us, she shouted, but David was somewhere between consciousness and dreams, his mind still partly connected to the dying alien family. In that strange space between human and alien thoughts, David saw something that gave him hope. The solution wasn't in complex technology or expensive equipment. It was in the simplest thing of all, life itself. The answer lay in the station's hydroponic gardens, in the living organisms that kept the air clean and the food growing. If they could find the right combination of Earth plants and alien biology, they might be able to create a living shield against the quantum interference. It was impossible by every law of science David knew, but then again, humans had a talent for making the impossible work. As consciousness slowly returned to his battered brain, David had only one thought: they finally knew how to save the Zephyrian family. Now they just had to figure out how to do it before it was too late. Leon Washington's fingers danced across the communication array controls like a pianist playing the most important song of his life. Red warning lights flashed throughout Kepler Station, and the loud blaring of alarms made it hard to think. Through the thick windows of the control room, they could all see the sleek black ships of the Galactic Confederation Security Force getting closer and closer. I've mapped the exact frequency we need, Leon shouted over the noise of the alarms. But there's a big problem. When I fire this counter signal, it's going to overload every system on this station. The main power core will explode, life support will fail in 3 different sections, and we'll probably all die in the process. Dr. David Carter was still dizzy from his experience with the neural interface. His head throbbed with pain, and he could still feel echoes of alien thoughts bouncing around in his brain. But through all that confusion, he remembered the images the Zephyrian family had shared with him, memories of their ancestors using living creatures to solve impossible problems. "Wait," David said, his voice weak but determined. "There might be another way. When I was connected to their minds, they showed me something incredible. Their people used to create power sources out of living things, plants and microorganisms that could generate the same kind of energy as their quantum technology." Angela Brooks looked up from her computer, where she was tracking the approaching security ships. "David, that sounds like science fiction. We're not genetic engineers. We don't have the equipment or the knowledge to create living power sources." "But we do have something," David said, suddenly feeling stronger as the alien memories became clearer in his mind. "We have the station's hydroponic gardens. Every space station needs plants to recycle the air and grow food. And we have samples of organisms from dozens of different worlds." Leon paused his work on the communication array. "You're talking about mixing Earth plants with alien biology. That's not just impossible, it should be deadly. Different worlds have completely different chemistry. The Zephyrians' entire nervous system is basically a living computer," David explained, stumbling toward the door that led to the agricultural section. "Their thoughts are electrical patterns running through organic tissue. If we can create something similar using plants from our hydroponics bay." The sound of metal boots echoed through the corridors. The Confederation security forces had docked with the station and were making their way toward the medical bay. Angela's computer showed their heat signatures moving through the station's hallways, getting closer every minute. "David, they're almost here," Angela called out, her voice tight with worry. "We have maybe 5 minutes before they reach us." In the hydroponics bay, David looked around at the rows of growing plants. Tomatoes, lettuce, soybeans, and dozens of other earth crops grew under artificial sunlight. But there were also alien plants, strange purple vines from Centauri Prime, crystalline moss from the Vega system, and bioluminescent algae from a dozen different worlds. "Leon, help me with this," David said, grabbing containers of the glowing algae. "We need to mix these cultures with genetic material from the Zephyrian family. I know it sounds crazy, but their thoughts showed me exactly how to do it." Leon shook his head in disbelief but started helping anyway. "This goes against everything I learned in engineering school. Biological systems can't generate quantum coherence. It's physically impossible." "Tell that to the Zephyrians walking around with quantum computers in their heads," David replied, using medical scanners to extract genetic samples. "Sometimes impossible just means nobody's tried it yet." Angela's voice crackled over the intercom from the control room. "Guys, the security team just reached the medical bay. They're asking where we are. I'm running out of ways to stall them." David mixed the alien algae with synthesized Zephyrian genetic material, using every piece of medical equipment he could find to encourage the different cells to work together. According to human science, this should have killed both organisms instantly. Different worlds meant different DNA, different chemistry, different everything. But as David worked, he remembered the alien memories more clearly. The Zephyrians hadn't used force to make different life forms work together. They had found ways to help them communicate, to share resources, to become stronger together than they could be apart. "It's not about forcing them to be the same," David muttered to himself as he adjusted the cellular growth chambers. "It's about helping them understand each other." Leon was preparing the counter-frequency pulse, even though they all knew it would probably destroy the station. "David, whatever you're doing, do it fast. I can hear the security team getting closer." Then something amazing happened. The mixture of algae and Zephyrian genetic material began to glow. Not just the normal green color of Earth algae, but the same beautiful blue light that came from Zephyrian skin patterns. The hybrid organism was actually working, creating the same kind of bioelectrical fields that Zephyrians used for thinking. "Angela, how much time do we have?" David called out. 30 seconds before they break down the door," came her reply. The living power source was growing stronger, its blue glow spreading through the hydroponic tanks. David could feel something like electricity in the air, but it was different from normal electricity. It felt alive, organic, like the heartbeat of a living planet. Leon's hands hovered over the controls for the counter-frequency pulse. David, I still need to fire the counter signal. The living power source is great, but it won't stop the quantum interference that's killing the Zephyrian family. Wait, David said, watching as the hybrid algae continued to grow and spread. What if we don't need to destroy the quantum field? What if we can use this living power source to create a protective barrier instead? The sound of boots was right outside the hydroponics bay now. Angela's voice came over the intercom one last time, "They're here." David made a desperate decision. Instead of using the counter-frequency to destroy the harmful quantum field, he connected the living power source directly to the station's biosupport systems. The hybrid algae began spreading through the air recycling system, its protective bioelectrical field spreading throughout the entire station. The door to the hydroponics bay exploded inward as Confederation security forces in full armor charged through. But something unexpected was happening. The Zephyrian family, who had been dying in the medical bay, suddenly started glowing brighter. Their natural light patterns were returning as the living power source created a protective shield around their minds. Leon fired the counter-frequency pulse at exactly the same moment the security forces entered the room. But instead of destroying the station's power core, the pulse was absorbed and redirected by the hybrid organisms throughout the biosupport systems. The impossible had happened. Human determination, alien wisdom, and the simple power of life working together had created a solution that no single species could have imagined. The Zephyrian family was saved, and the station was still in one piece. As the security forces stood in stunned silence, David smiled despite the pain in his head. Sometimes being human meant believing that impossible just meant nobody had been stubborn enough to try yet. The entire station shook like an earthquake was tearing it apart. Kepler Station's metal walls groaned and creaked as the experimental power core began to overload. Sparks flew from control panels, and the lights flickered on and off like a broken disco ball. The artificial gravity went crazy, making everyone feel like they were on a roller coaster that was about to fly off the tracks. But something miraculous was happening in Bay 7. The Zephyrian family, who had been dying just moments before, suddenly blazed with brilliant blue light. Their skin patterns weren't just flickering anymore, they were shining like beautiful stars coming back to life. The counter-frequency pulse had worked. The horrible static in their minds was finally gone, and their telepathic abilities were healing themselves. Look at the living power source. Dr. David Carter shouted over the chaos of alarms and braking equipment. The hybrid algae they had created was pulsing with the same quantum energy as the station's main power systems. Somehow, impossibly, the living organisms were keeping the entire station running even as the artificial power core fell apart. Leon Washington was crawling through a maintenance tunnel, frantically reconnecting power cables to work with their new biological energy source. This should be completely impossible according to every physics textbook ever written, but it's working, he called out, his voice echoing through the metal corridors. The bioelectric field from our hybrid plants is actually fixing the quantum problems throughout the whole station. The Confederation security forces stood in the hydroponics bay like statues, their mouths hanging open in amazement. These were trained soldiers who had seen battles across the galaxy, but they had never witnessed anything like this. The organic power source wasn't just replacing the failed artificial core, it was actively repairing damage throughout the station that should have been impossible to fix. Life support systems that had been shutting down suddenly hummed back to life. The artificial gravity stabilized, making everyone's feet plant firmly on the floor again. Emergency barriers slammed shut over hull breaches that could have sucked everyone into space. The living power source was healing the station like a doctor treating a patient. David felt something strange happening in his mind. HFY, one of the Zephyrian parents, was somehow communicating with him telepathically. Even though David was human and shouldn't have been able to receive alien thoughts, the neural interface experience had left his brain partially open to their communication method. The feeling was like having someone whisper directly into his thoughts, but in a good way. David could sense overwhelming gratitude flowing from HFY's mind, along with something else, knowledge. The Zephyrians were somehow downloading their entire medical database directly into the station's computers, sharing thousands of years of biological research with the humans who had saved their lives. This is our gift, HFY's translated thoughts seemed to whisper inside David's head. For those who refuse to abandon strangers in need. Commander Reynolds of the Confederation Security Force walked around the restored hydroponics bay, shaking his head in disbelief. He was a career military officer who had seen advanced technology from hundreds of different worlds, but this was beyond anything in his experience. "How did you accomplish this?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "What you've done here violates at least a dozen fundamental laws of physics." Angela Brooks stepped forward, her voice calm and steady despite everything they had been through in the past few hours. "Sometimes the word impossible just means that nobody has been stubborn enough to try yet." Over the following months, the galaxy would change in ways that no one could have predicted. The Zephyrian family's testimony about the war crimes they had witnessed led to massive political upheaval. 3 powerful members of the Galactic Council were arrested and put on trial. New laws were passed to protect refugees and prevent future genocides. The evidence that the family had been carrying sparked investigations that uncovered corruption throughout the galaxy's government. The living power source technology that David, Leon, and Angela had accidentally created became a revolution in energy production. Instead of using dangerous quantum cores that could explode or poison entire species, worlds across human space began growing their own power sources using modified plants and algae. Energy became cleaner, safer, and available to everyone. David Carter, Leon Washington, and Angela Brooks should have faced court-martial proceedings for disobeying direct orders from Earth Command. They had destroyed expensive equipment, violated quarantine protocols, and risked their lives for aliens they barely knew. But when the political implications became clear, the military quietly dropped all charges. Instead, the 3 humans found themselves in charge of the new Human Zephyrian Medical Research Initiative, working to adapt alien biotechnology to help treat diseases that had been considered incurable. Months later, David stood in a medical facility watching the first successful treatment of a brain disorder that had puzzled human doctors for centuries. Using the biological knowledge shared by the grateful Zephyrians, they had developed living medicines that could repair damaged neural pathways. Patients who had been told they would never walk or speak again were making full recoveries. As David watched a young girl take her first steps after years in a wheelchair, he thought about what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. The Centaurians would have calculated the risks and decided the probability of success was too low. The Altarians would have worried about insurance liability and legal complications. The vegans would have formed a committee to study the problem for years before taking action. But humans saw people who needed help, and they simply refused to walk away. It didn't matter if those people were from Earth or from a planet 1,000 light-years away. It didn't matter if helping them was dangerous, expensive, or supposedly impossible. When someone was in trouble, humans stayed and fought, even when everyone else gave up. In a galaxy where most species made decisions based on logic, profit, and self-preservation, humans had a different approach. They made decisions based on what felt right in their hearts. They believed that some things were more important than following rules or protecting their own interests. They believed that every life had value, regardless of what planet it came from. The Zephyrian family had been abandoned by an entire galaxy, left to die because saving them was too risky and too expensive. But 3 humans had looked at that impossible situation and decided to try anyway. They had succeeded not because they were smarter or stronger than other species, but because they were willing to care about strangers. And that, David realized, was the most human thing of all.